We're going to begin our journey at the very eastern tip of Kurdistan, and we're going to cross hundreds of kilometers across this region to look at the Kurds' quest for independence and economic stability after 3 decades of brutal suppression.
Northern Iraq sits on the borders between Syria, Turkey and Iran. Smuggling and the black market are part of the fabric of life here, crucial to the economy. In towns like Bashmak, people dabble in smuggling simply because, well, they have to earn a living somehow. I expected the frontier with Iran to be secure. I'm on the Iraqi side now, and ahead, the usual passport and visa formalities, customs posts. But then I discovered entering Iran without any paperwork at all couldn't be easier. You just skirt around the border fence. Hundreds do it every day. Some of them on 4 legs. Forget the passport. A good pair of boots and a packed lunch is all you need to walk into Iran. I decided to go for it myself and joined smuggler Hamed, who had a black market TV on his back.
Well, at this point, we're just walking now into the Islamic Republic. There are no border guards here, there's no barbed wire, there's absolutely nothing. This is a completely open border.
I left him walking in the direction of Tehran. Back on the Iraqi side of the frontier, thousands of litres of smuggled Iranian benzene. A sort of gasoline zaras. Idris has been working the black market for 7 years. His dad was a smuggler too. And what do you smuggle?
I smuggle tea, tobacco, kerosene.
Is it dangerous?
We come here because we have no other work. We have to feed our families. It's not dangerous. Only the alcohol smugglers run the risk of being shot.
The alcohol smugglers sounded like the elite, the black market's daring special forces. I wanted to meet them. It didn't take long to find one gang preparing for their nightly run to Iran. Alcohol is strictly forbidden in the Islamic Republic, but this booze and other contraband will soon be crossing the border. When it has a crackdown, Iran executes alcohol smugglers. And so I was surprised how open they were to be filmed. Although smuggler Masood asked for his face to be disguised.
It's risky, yes. The Iranians crack down from time to time and hang alcohol smugglers, so I'm afraid of crossing the border with whiskey. I've been doing it for 18 months, but there is no other work here, and I have to look after my family. I'll make $20 tonight. I know I might die earning it, but what else can I do?
Before we left the frontier, I met one local who was keen to give me the inside story on the border.
Everything comes and goes here. I mean everything. It's a scandal. Mostly it's alcohol and drugs, but weapons too, and gunmen trained in Iran. They pass through here to fight in Iraq. They're quite open, and even ask us local people for directions. The American soldiers come for a look from time to time, but they don't stay long, and the smuggling goes on and on.
As I left Bashmak, I was wondering how the black market impacted on Kurdistan's fledgling economy. And for a region struggling for independence, surely it was going to have to secure its borders better than this. I headed 30 kilometers south to look at another pressing issue facing Kurdistan as it pushes for autonomy: terrorism. Four years ago, a then unknown Islamic group called Ansar al-Islam invaded the Kurdish border town of Bihara. Like the Taliban in Afghanistan, they imposed a ban on music, prevented females from being educated. Menfolk were ordered to grow beards. Those dark days will stay with this old man.
Our life was very bad because we were not free.
Give me some examples.
We couldn't be free to do as we wanted. And my son was punished for playing music. He was beaten by Ansar al-Islam members. He ended up in hospital.
Then, at the start of the war against Iraq, the Americans blitzed Ansar's headquarters with cruise missiles. It was assumed the leaders of Ansar had been killed under tons of flattened concrete. I discovered they weren't. But what really happened here? The clues I found on mountains near the town. The Islamist Ansar leadership certainly expected to die in the US bombing raid. They'd even dug their own graves, seen here for the first time. But their empty tombs supported the stories I'd heard that they actually survived the attack. To get more proof, I needed to meet a member of Ansar who'd survived. And to do that, I needed access to a prison in nearby Soleimaniye, where I'd heard some members of Ansar were being held. I got permission to go in, and for the first time on television, an Ansar foot soldier, Abdul Rahman, told me some members of Ansar were killed, but the leadership survived.
We were tipped off about a possible American attack on our base at Bihara. We only had a few hours' notice, but we managed to get out in time. I don't know how we got the information, but we all escaped. The US missiles missed us completely.
Ansar is still active in Kurdistan, although it's now morphed into other Islamic movements. The last time they claimed responsibility for attacks was back in 2004, when they kidnapped and executed 11 Iraqi National Guardsmen. Unlike Iraq proper, Kurdistan is relatively free from attacks, and that may be due to the overhauling of its security forces. And those same troops will also bolster the region's push for independence. To find out more about that, I headed to a Peshmerga base near Soleimaniye. The Kurdish Peshmerga have a long and proud tradition as freedom fighters against the armies of Saddam Hussein. But even they might admit they were something of a ragtag fighting force. Well, not anymore. At this parade ground, I could see the Peshmergas are being transformed into a regular, disciplined army. And with Kurdistan's independence push, elite armed units are being formed like the Cobras seen here for the first time. They're the pride of the new-look Kurdish fighting forces. Their motto, quick, silent, and deadly. I sensed squads like the Cobras are clearly an essential element to any dreams of independence for Kurdistan. The Kurds will always have a steady stream of motivated young men wanting to join them. But although there's no shortage of manpower, other resources for the army are limited. For example, new tanks are a long way off. But using Kurdish ingenuity, somehow they're keeping their old ones on the move. They captured these Russian tanks from Saddam's army.
The biggest problem the Kurds have is keeping these dinosaurs moving. To get spare parts, they have to go onto the black market and buy them from smugglers.
Ah yes, the old black market again. I was discovering the Kurdish economy thrives on it. Probably couldn't work without it. And more evidence of that. On the way south from Salamania, we passed kilometers of vehicles waiting for gasoline, a grim part of daily life here. The line just goes on and on and on. It's not a pleasant wait either. The fumes from impure fuel stick in your throat.
To stand any chance at all, you have to join lines like this first thing in the morning. You can, of course, buy gas on the black market, but it's 4 times the price.
Coming up, I stay in the east to meet a resistance movement who are ready to die for Kurdish independence. Kurdistan leader President Masoud Barzani talks about autonomy for his homeland and tells Al-Jazeera he'd never surrender the disputed town of Kirkuk.
This is an Iraqi city which truly belongs to Kurdistan.
I'm John Cookson in northern Iraq, examining the Kurdish push for independence and along the way uncovering some stories in Kurdistan which have been unreported until now. So far I've only travelled 100 or so kilometres down the region's border with Iran. There's a long way to go before I reach Dahuk in the north, but before leaving the east, I meet Kurds with aspirations of independence, not in Iraq, but in Iran. The Kurds have a saying that their only friends are the mountains, and up in the rarefied air above Salamania, I discovered a guerrilla group few have heard of. They're called Komala, and their roots are in the banned Communist Party of Iran. For the first time, they allowed television cameras into their training camp and invited me to one of their rallies. Many in the hall weren't even born when Komala evolved, but the movement's become a focal point for disaffected Iranian youths who cross the porous border. They come here for inspiration and their orders to carry out subversive activities inside Iran.
I'm an Iranian university student. I'm wearing a mask because if I'm recognized, I'll be executed. I'm one of many youths who have no future in Iran, and I am here to get my orders and to deliver intelligence. We want to bring down the regime in Tehran and establish independence for Kurds on the Iranian side of the border.
Then I was invited on a training exercise. Now, like most Kurds, they're used to the mountains and they're fit. Striding up the slopes is effortless. They wanted to show me they were well trained, and they mounted a mock attack on imaginary Iranian positions. Abdullah Muhtadi is the leader of Komala. He was imprisoned and tortured twice under the Shah, and then again during the regime of Ayatollah Khomeini.
There are obstacles and there are challenges as well, because you know President Ahmadinejad is a very strict and tough president. He is determined to impose very strict rules on Iran and get Iran back to 2 decades ago. This means a bloodbath.
Even in the pouring rain, you could sense this region was undergoing radical change, and the Kurds' yearning for a defined homeland could not be dampened. Time to leave the east, which is controlled by Kurdish leader Jalal Talabani, that's him on the right, and I'm heading west to a region ruled by Masoud Barzani. Barzani's power base is in Erbil. On the way, I was planning to visit the oil-rich city of Kirkuk. You can't examine the Kurds' quest for independence without the debate over Kirkuk. Every Kurd will tell you the city belongs to them, but Iraqi Arabs disagree. President Masoud Barzani insists Kirkuk is part of an independent Kurdistan.
The Kurdish people can't accept an entity like Kurdistan without Kirkuk being a part of it. We can make it as safe as any other part of Kurdistan.
Erbil's been turned into a construction site. I could feel the energy, the dynamism of the city on the move. In Erbil, I could truly sense I was in a world away from some of the inertia and grinding poverty which is gripping the rest of Iraq. I'd learned the Kurdish people were seeking true independence beyond being part of a federal Iraq, and Barzani wouldn't disagree with that.
This is a legitimate and natural right for any nation and people. For now, our parliament says we should be part of Iraq, but in the long term, we want our independence.
There's another tricky issue troubling the Kurds, the continuing presence of Turkish troops on Kurdish soil. To investigate, I travelled north to Balmani. Officially, there are no Turkish troops in Kurdistan, but I found some, 30 kilometers from the Turkish border inside Kurdistan. Here, at a disused airbase, you're looking at something neither the Turks nor the Iraqi government will admit: the presence of Turkish tanks and soldiers on Kurdish soil. The Turks have an ongoing war with the Kurd separatist group, the PKK, and they're trying to wipe them out with help from the US. But there are no PKK bases in the Balmani area, so why are the Turks here? Local Kurd soldiers detest the Turks and want them out. First Sergeant Hajat always turns his back on them.
No one wants them here. We don't even look at them. This is Kurdish soil. They shouldn't be here. They say they're protecting Turkey from the PKK, but there are no PKK bases anywhere near here. They're high in the mountains. So why are the Turks here?
Turkish troops on Kurdish soil remains a mystery, but must be a threat to Kurdish hopes of autonomy. Later, I asked the Turkish government in Ankara, why are Turkish troops in Kurdistan? I got no response. Saddam's brutal Anfal campaign, which sprang from the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, is seared in the memory of every Kurd. Thousands of them died when the Iraqi leader mounted a purge on entire communities whom he accused of aiding Kurdish Peshmerga resistance fighters.
We've taken a detour to the Barzan Valley to investigate one of the worst atrocities ever committed by Saddam Hussein's forces against the Kurds. Now, what happened here was that the Peshmerga fighters were living in the mountains over there. They were getting their supplies, that's food and arms, from the villages below. So what Saddam did was to send his men into the villages, and they completely wiped them. They took away the men, the boys, the children, the animals. Everyone was taken away from the villages to refugee camps. 8,000 of them were never seen again.
One of the first things you notice about the town of Barzan is the number of women and the absence of men who've been murdered years before.
It was a very bad day for us when the soldiers came. They took away my husband and 3 sons. I never saw them again. It was 3 a.m. when the soldiers came and took my husband, my cousins and brother-in-law. These people were innocent, killed for nothing.
As she recalled the events of that terrible night, she simply became lost in thought, still traumatized after all those years. A week in Kurdistan was almost over, and I ended the journey at Duhok. 1,000 kilometers of travel terminating at something as mundane as the Maxi shopping mall. You have to keep reminding yourself you're actually in Iraq. Ordinary it may be for many in the West, but this shopping center epitomizes part of Kurdistan's economic future. I was wondering when Baghdad would have anything like this. A shopping mall where customers can wander without fear. The fact this young assistant would have to pay 4 years' wages for the TV behind him is really irrelevant. The main thing is the Maxi Mall exists, and some Kurds can now afford to buy goods here. As the Kurds push for independence, many more shopping centres like this will surely follow. No black market here, instead supermarkets are driving the new economy.
So what have we learnt about Kurdistan during this road trip? Well, it's a region still obviously deeply traumatized by the brutalities of the past. As for the present, it's undergoing enormous social changes. And for the future, well, the future, as always with the Kurds, depends on security.
Northern Iraq has been relatively secure after the toppling of Saddam, and since then Kurdistan has been quietly building a truly independent state. As I discovered on this journey, the borders aren't exactly secure, the black market is still rampant. Every so often the region suffers from terrorism, and there are serious issues like the control of Kirkuk. But maybe the other building blocks of statehood are there, and the Kurds are now ready to turn their homeland into a real and independent nation.
The change is possible, and this is not the destiny of the Kurds to be under oppression. Yes, everybody feels that something is going to happen and something must happen.